Have you ever witnessed someone die, only to have them serve you coffee years later? That's what made war veteran Caleb Hartman stop cold, his pulse racing, eyes fixed on the waitress's burned arm. The tattoo, partially concealed beneath those scars, wasn't just decoration. It belonged to a fallen unit he had once fought alongside. A unit that had lost their combat medic, a woman they had grieved as dead. Yet here she was, carrying plates, enduring quiet cruelty, and concealing something far more dangerous than mere shame. What followed unraveled a twisted chain of arrogance, silence, and a covert pursuit of justice that no one had anticipated. Where are you watching from? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that reveal what truly matters. Raina Jefferson had mastered the art of counting breaths when the pain began. Not her own pain, but the kind others tried to inflict with their words. By the time Travis Langdon slammed his fist against table 7, making the silverware jump, she had already reached breath number 5. She didn't flinch, not anymore. Well, look who's here. Freddy Krueger decided to clock in today, he jeered, loud enough to freeze the diner in silence. Laughter followed, thin, brittle laughter, from his sidekick, Elliot Crane, who always reacted a beat too late, like a bad echo. "Hey, monster," Travis sneered, waving his mug in the air. "How about a refill? Try not to melt the cup with those crispy hands." Raina stood at the edge of their booth, the half-filled coffee pot steady in her grasp. Not a single drop trembled inside the glass. Her uniform was immaculate. White shirt, long sleeves rolled neatly to her wrists, black apron tied snug. Where her skin was visible, it told an unmistakable story of fire. Patches of smooth and taut flesh, climbing from her knuckles, vanishing beneath the fabric. "Good morning," she said evenly, pouring into Travis's cup. "Black. No sugar." Travis's smirk faltered, if only for a moment. The waitress's tattoo showed just slightly. It always did when she refused to flinch. She remembered Elliot chuckling. "Got a fireproof memory?" Raina moved on to Elliot's mug without replying, then to the third man's, then the fourth. 4 regulars. Every Tuesday. Same booth. Same ritual. Public humiliation over pancakes and coffee. Only this Tuesday was different. Across the diner, by the window, Caleb Hartman sat in a corner booth, table 42. His shoulders were broad, streaks of gray just beginning to show in his close-cropped hair. A scuffed duffel bag rested beside him, worn from miles of travel. He looked like nothing more than another road-weary customer, getting a refill before the next stretch. But Caleb wasn't moving. Not his fork, not his eyes. They were fixed on Raina. Not because of the burns. He had seen worse in the sandbox. What stopped him cold was something else, something that punched the air from his lungs the moment she bent to pick up a dropped napkin. Her sleeve slipped just enough for him to see it. The ink. The top curve of a number, faint now, partly swallowed by scar tissue, yet unmistakable. His coffee went cold in his hand. Caleb stared like he'd seen a ghost, because, in a way, he had. He knew that tattoo. He'd seen it in a war zone, on a woman who sprinted through gunfire to drag wounded soldiers from burning wrecks. A woman who refused to leave the field until every man was accounted for. They'd called her KJ. KJ had died in Fallujah, or so he'd believed. No body, just blood, smoke, and silence. And now, she was here, pouring coffee. Travis, oblivious, leaned back and kicked his boots up. "Tell me something, Raina. You fall into a meth lab?" Or was it a romantic bonfire gone wrong? More chuckles. A few heads turned, but no one spoke up. No one ever did. Raina smiled, the kind of smile that made Caleb lean forward. "Neither," she said, "but thank you for your creative theories." That threw Travis. He didn't like resistance when it came wrapped in politeness. "You know what I think?" Elliot chimed in. "I think she was cooking something in her little ghetto kitchen and kaboom!" Raina's hand didn't shake. She simply capped the coffee pot. "Enjoy your breakfast, gentlemen." She turned, and as she did, Caleb rose. "Excuse me," he said, stepping toward her. She looked up, meeting his eyes. That's when he saw it, not just the tattoo, but the stance. Shoulders squared, weight balanced evenly, hands relaxed, yet ready. The way soldiers stand when they're not sure if they're home. "Ma'am," he asked quietly, "where did you serve?" Raina's eyes narrowed a fraction. "Sir, can I help you with something?" "First Infantry Division," he said. "Big Red 1, Fallujah. I had a medic there, KJ. She disappeared during a night raid. Saved 5 guys before the Humvee exploded." The diner noise seemed to fade. Raina's gaze locked on his. For 1 second, then 2, then 3. "KJ," he said again. "That was you." Raina's voice dropped to a whisper. "Have you ever seen someone die and then pour your coffee?" The veteran freezes. Years later, Caleb sat down slowly, both hands flat on the table. Travis hadn't heard a word of their brief exchange. He was too busy filming. "This right here," he said into his phone's camera, "is the Burned Waitress who serves us at Langdon and Crane Consulting's favorite diner. Check out the crispy skin, boys." Raina turned toward him, her voice steady. "You might want to save that for court." Travis laughed. Elliot laughed louder. Caleb didn't. He was too busy watching a soldier prepare for battle. Only this time, the war wasn't in the desert. Raina didn't speak to Caleb again for the next 20 minutes, not out of fear, but calculation. As she moved through the diner with the same measured precision she once used in field hospitals under enemy fire, she studied him, his eyes, his posture, his reactions. He hadn't come to gawk. He hadn't pitied her. He had recognized her, and that made him either dangerous or useful. Caleb sat in the corner, his coffee untouched, watching as Travis Langdon filmed video after video of Raina, as though she were some sort of sideshow. Elliot Crane kept snorting behind his own phone, egging him on. Their other 2 companions, corporate types with glossy shoes and dull eyes, still laughed, but with less enthusiasm now. The mood had shifted, even if they hadn't realized it yet. The bell above the door jingled. A family of 5 entered. Raina greeted them with a warm smile, guided them to a booth by the window, and handed out menus, all while keeping Travis in the corner of her vision. She caught Caleb watching her again, this time not with recognition, but with concern. He understood what she was doing. She was waiting for the right moment. But Travis wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. "Hey, Raina!" he barked, waving his phone like a TV remote. "Come do that smile again for my followers." She turned slowly. "Sir, I'm working." "Exactly," he grinned. "Work that charm, baby. Or do I need to start tipping based on skin tone?" The comment landed in the diner's air like a dropped weight. Even Elliot's laugh faltered. Raina walked over, calm but firm, her fingers tightening around her notepad. "Mr. Langdon," she said quietly, clearly, "if you continue recording me without consent, I'll have to ask you to stop." "You'll have to what?" he barked. "You work here. You don't get to tell me anything." "Actually," Miguel Torres's voice cut in from behind the counter. Texas law says otherwise. Travis turned toward the manager. Excuse me? One-party consent for the story behind the symbol. Recording is one thing, Miguel said evenly, still behind the counter. Harassment, that's a different story. He didn't raise his voice, didn't take a step forward, but his look made it clear. He wasn't asking twice. Travis scoffed, waved him off, and turned back to his phone. Come on, Raina, don't be like that. Just smile for the camera. That's all you're good for anyway. That's when the man in the booth across the aisle began choking. It started with a sharp cough, then a hand clamped to his throat. His wife shot to her feet in panic. The older man staggered, his face reddening fast. Raina dropped her notepad. In 2 strides, she was at his side. Sir, can you breathe? She asked, already scanning his airway. He shook his head violently. Her arm slid around his torso. I'm performing the Heimlich, she announced. 1, 2. The third thrust dislodged a chunk of sausage. The man gasped, collapsing into the booth. Applause rippled through the diner. Raina stepped back, checked his pulse with 2 fingers against his wrist. You're okay, she said gently. Just rest. Breathe slowly. His wife gripped Raina's hand. Thank you so much. Raina gave a single nod and stood. Travis had stopped recording. Elliot's phone was down. Even Caleb looked momentarily stunned, despite already knowing what she could do. Raina turned to Miguel. I'll comp their meal. He nodded silently. Then she walked back toward Travis and Elliot. Her expression had changed. The air around her seemed to shift. She wasn't just calm anymore. She was in command. Gentlemen, she said crisply, do you still require anything else? Travis's lips moved, but no words came out. Didn't think so, she said with a thin smile, then walked away. Caleb stood and intercepted her near the counter. That was textbook, he said. Perfect form. Raina gave him a brief glance. 3 tours. You don't forget. He hesitated. You were KJ. Still am, she replied, though not many know it. Why didn't you say anything all this time? Would they have listened? He didn't answer. They both knew the truth. You died, he said finally. I disappeared. The fire took everything. Papers, proof. All that's left are scars. Caleb was silent for a long moment. I saw you run into that smoke. You never came back. I thought that I was gone. She looked at him then. Really looked. Her eyes were tired, but unbroken. Parts of me were. Miguel approached. Everything okay here? Raina nodded. For now. Miguel's eyes narrowed at Caleb. You're not with them? God, no. Good, because I like my floorboards blood-free. Raina almost smiled. Then Travis's voice rang out again. You know what this place needs? New waitresses, ones without Frankenstein arms. The diner went silent. Heads turned. Raina took a breath. Back to work, she said. Caleb hesitated. They won't stop. I know. So, what's the play? She glanced over her shoulder. The story behind the symbol. The scar tissue on Raina Jefferson's hands wasn't the kind you could ignore. It told its story without asking permission. Raised ridges of heat-twisted skin climbing from her knuckles and vanishing beneath her sleeves. But it was the faint, faded tattoo hidden under those burns that made Caleb Hartman's chest tighten. It wasn't random ink. It was a unit code. Their unit. Years ago, they'd bled together in the same desert, watched the same night skies lit with fire, and mourned the same losses, including her, the combat medic who never made it back, the woman they buried in their hearts when no body was recovered. And yet, here she was, pouring coffee in a diner that smelled of grease and burned toast, enduring snickers from men who wouldn't have lasted 10 minutes in her boots. Caleb hadn't touched his mug. Couldn't. His hands stayed locked on the edge of the table as he watched Travis Langdon, self-appointed king of Table 7, slam his fist down hard enough to rattle the silverware. "Look who's here," Travis barked, loud enough for the whole diner to hear. Freddy Krueger decided to pick up a shift today. Brittle laughter followed from Elliot Crane, his wingman, always one beat behind like a bad echo. "Hey, monster," Travis sneered, waving his mug. "How about a refill? Try not to melt the cup with those crispy hands." Raina stood at the edge of their booth, coffee pot steady in her grasp. Not a single drop trembled inside the glass. Her uniform was spotless, sleeves rolled just to the wrist, apron tied tight. "Good morning," she said evenly, pouring without spilling. "Black, no sugar." Travis's smirk faltered for half a second, but he recovered, leaning back like a man who thought the room belonged to him. Caleb knew better. The room had just shifted. They had accused her of staging it all, claimed the burn scars were for sympathy. The diner fell into an icy silence. Then one of the veterans rose. "I watched her pull a soldier out of a burning Humvee," he said. "Her arm caught fire. She didn't stop." Travis Langdon shifted in his seat as another veteran stood, then another. Each one spoke. Each one remembered. By the end, 12 men and women were on their feet, confirming exactly who Raina Jefferson was and what she had done. Langdon's face twisted. The cameras kept rolling. Raina stepped forward. "I didn't burn myself for sympathy," she said, her voice steady. "I earned every scar saving men who thought their lives were over. You built a company on fear and discrimination, and now you're afraid of a waitress." She turned to the cameras. "That's the real story." Langdon fled again, and this time no one followed. Raina Jefferson stepped into the back room of Ray's diner, untied her apron, and let herself breathe for the first time all day. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from release, the kind that comes after holding the line for too long. Out front, Caleb Hartman was closing the blinds and ushering the last of the veterans out the side door. They had stayed late, cleaning, clearing tables, fixing a leaky faucet. One had quietly reinforced the front door with a box of nails. They knew a storm wasn't over, just because the thunder had stopped. Miguel came in with 2 mugs of coffee and handed one to Raina without a word. "You holding up?" Caleb asked. "My feet hurt. My ears are ringing. I can't feel my left shoulder," she replied, taking a sip. "But yes." Miguel sat down. "We had news crews camped outside this morning. I had to shoo one off the roof." "It's not about me anymore," Raina said. "It's about what I represent. That scares them more." "Good," Caleb muttered. "Let it." The door opened again. Lena Marquez stepped in, still wearing the pressed blazer she'd had on national TV that morning. "Raina," she greeted. "Hope you weren't planning to sleep tonight." Raina smirked. "Not in the last few weeks." Lena set a tablet on the table and tapped the screen. A chart appeared. Timelines, social media trends, a map of viral spread. "You're international now, picked up in 6 languages. The footage of Langdon being shouted down by 12 veterans has been viewed 8.2 million times. Caleb gave a low whistle. "Comment sections are 90% positive," Lena added. "The rest are bots." Miguel nodded toward Raina. She won't say it, but she's exhausted. She can be exhausted later, Lena said. Right now, we have an opportunity. For what? Raina asked. To turn this into more than a takedown. To build something. I'm not a movement. No, Lena agreed. You're the spark. The rest comes after. The idea tugged at old dormant parts of Raina, the parts that hadn't died in Iraq, the parts that had gone quiet after the explosion. What would that look like? She asked. Veteran advocacy, policy change, workplace reform, corporate accountability. You can speak where others have been silenced, and people will listen. Raina looked at Caleb. You in? Always. That weekend, Raina and Caleb met with a local nonprofit that helped veterans reintegrate into civilian life. They gave testimony and told their story to a boardroom of policymakers. Cameras were rolling, but for once, Raina didn't feel watched. She felt heard. One woman wept openly. Another passed Raina a note afterward. My brother didn't make it home, but if he had, I'd want him to meet you. The next Tuesday at Ray's Diner, Travis Langdon did not return, but his lawyer did. She arrived alone, dressed in a professional suit, carrying a cease and desist letter for defamation. Miguel took the envelope without expression. You'll need to serve that properly, Caleb said from a nearby booth. And it won't stick. Truth is the best defense. My client wishes to resolve this quietly, the lawyer said. Raina stepped out from the back. Your client tried to destroy lives publicly. Now he wants silence in return? The lawyer's eyes flicked toward the cameras. She hadn't realized they were rolling. You're being recorded for everyone's protection, Caleb said. The lawyer left without another word. Later that evening, a new face appeared. A man in his 50s, military haircut, uniform coat folded neatly over his arm. He waited until the dinner rush passed. Sergeant Jefferson? She looked up. Colonel Avery Mason, retired. You treated me in Ramadi. I was unconscious. Never got to thank you. You're welcome, she said, shaking his hand slowly. The Pentagon is watching. So is the Department of Veterans Affairs. If you ever want to speak to them, say the word. I will, Raina replied. When I'm ready. Outside, the night air was cool. Raina and Caleb sat on the back steps, watching the quiet street. You did it, Caleb said. Not yet. Then what's this? Raina looked at the lights in the distance, at the quiet strength of those who had stood with her. This, she said, is just the beginning. When asked, Raina didn't respond immediately. Her gaze wandered across the photographs on the wall. Old friends, familiar eyes, moments frozen in time. Everything and nothing, she finally replied. People saw me differently, but I didn't change. I was just revealed. Revealed as what? As someone worth listening to. Outside, a man in a gray sedan circled the diner, snapping photographs. He never stepped inside, just slowed, passed twice, and left. Caleb discreetly took a photo of the license plate. You think it's Langdon's people? Miguel asked. Wouldn't put it past him, Caleb muttered. Let him come back, Raina said evenly. Let him walk through that door again. But this time, he'd better bring the truth. Tuesday arrived under a heavy sky, storm clouds pressing low. Despite the weather, the diner stayed busy. A group of retired nurses occupied the back corner booth, bringing flowers and leaving handwritten notes. We see you. Thank you for holding the line. At 10:32, a courier appeared with a letter from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Raina opened it at the counter. Caleb leaning over to read as she scanned the page. "What's it say?" he asked. "They want me to testify." He raised a brow. "Where?" "Senate Subcommittee. Workplace Discrimination Against Veterans." Caleb smiled. "That's your next battlefield." She folded the letter. That night, they began planning. Later, Travis Langdon released a video. Dim lighting, a cluttered office, his face unshaven and stripped of its usual bravado. "This is to set the record straight," he began. "I was wrong. I let a toxic culture fester under my watch. I hurt people. I mocked a woman who gave more to this country than I ever did. And if I could take it back, I would." He paused, swallowing hard. "But since I can't, I'm stepping down from Langdon and Crane, effective immediately. I'm donating my shares to a foundation that supports veteran reintegration." The video spread quickly. Reactions were divided. Some called it redemption, others a PR stunt. Raina said nothing, but when she watched, her expression softened just slightly. "That was real," Caleb remarked beside her. "Parts of it," she said, "and parts of it still matter." She looked toward the booth where Travis once sat. It was empty now, but the air no longer felt poisoned. Thursday brought another surprise. A group of high school students arrived with handmade signs. "Thank you, Miss Raina. Your scars are beautiful. Real heroes serve on all fronts." One student handed her a folder filled with essays, each about someone who showed invisible courage. Many had written about her. Raina read the first essay, then the second. By the third, she excused herself to the back room, letting the tears fall, not from pain, but from honor. That night, Lena recorded the final segment of her interview. "If you could tell your younger self one thing," she asked, "back when you thought you were lost forever, what would it be?" Raina took a long breath. "I'd say, your scars don't make you less. They make you undeniable." "Cut," Lena said with a smile. "That's the closing line." "It was never just mine," Raina replied. "It belongs to everyone who stayed standing." Outside, the storm finally broke. Rain tapped steadily on the roof, but inside, Ray's diner glowed warm. The war had become something else, a legacy. By Friday morning, the diner had become more than a meeting place. It was a symbol. Local papers called it the quiet epicenter of a national reckoning. Veterans from across the country began arriving, not for photographs or attention, but to shake Raina Jefferson's hand and leave behind pieces of their own history. Old dog tags, folded letters, a photograph taped to a canteen carried through Fallujah. She never asked for these offerings, but accepted each with reverence. Miguel cleared space for a display case, soon nicknamed the Archive. Caleb documented each item, photographing and labeling them. "This isn't a shrine," he said. "It's a record of unseen sacrifice." "And unfinished stories?" Raina added. That afternoon, another letter arrived, this one hand-signed by the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. It acknowledged her upcoming testimony and thanked her for reshaping public understanding of military service and its aftermath. She placed it in the archive between a bronze star citation and a weathered field map. Langdon's resignation set off a chain reaction. 6 executives stepped down within 48 hours, and the company's board voted to dissolve by the end of the quarter. Civil rights firms began contacting former employees to offer class action representation. Raina kept her public statements minimal. But one night, as she and Caleb closed up, she whispered, "It doesn't feel like a win." He nodded. "Because it's not about making them lose. It's about being seen. On Saturday, a military chaplain in uniform stood silently at the honor wall. When Raina approached, he spoke without turning. "You don't know me, but I've read every report. Field records, unit testimonials, the names you carried back. I buried 2 of them. They spoke your name with their last breath." Raina remained quiet. "You were never lost," he said, finally meeting her eyes. "Only hidden." He left a folded note beneath her photograph. Inside was a single line: "No greater love than to lay down one's life. You tried. You still do." In her 20s, wearing long sleeves and carrying a nervous look, she waited until the crowd had dispersed. Only then did she approach Raina, who was busy refilling the napkin holders. "I read about you," she began hesitantly. "I'm not a veteran, but I have these." She pushed her sleeves back, revealing scars, not from flames, but from pain all the same. Raina didn't recoil, didn't pry. She simply said, "You survived. That's your ribbon." The woman's eyes blinked rapidly, her voice barely audible. "Thank you." By evening, the diner buzzed with customers again. Lena returned with an editor to lock in the details of the documentary. Local musicians offered to perform live every Sunday. Even the mayor stopped in. Not for publicity, he insisted, but to say, "This city's better because of you." Miguel poured his coffee without ceremony, and Raina simply nodded. "Make it better for the next one." That night, with the sun dipping low over Ray's diner, Raina stepped outside and sat on the curb. Caleb joined her, holding 2 mugs. "One for every 100 conversations you've had this week," he joked, passing one to her. She gave a faint smile. "You think it lasts? The change? The respect? Justice?" Caleb didn't rush to answer. "If we hold the line, stay visible. Yes. But only if people like you keep showing up." She took a sip of coffee. "Then I'll show up every day, for as long as it takes." A breeze carried the scent of coffee and cedarwood, drifting from the honor wall. The night crept in quietly, but nothing about what Raina had built was quiet. It was loud in the ways that mattered, undeniable, like her scars, like her strength. The halls of Capitol Hill were colder than Raina Jefferson expected, not only in temperature, but in the undercurrent of tone. Marble walls echoed with political calculation. Still, she walked with steady steps, combat boots under pressed slacks, a blazer sharp and unpretentious. Beside her, Caleb Hartman carried a slim case containing the evidence Lena Marquez had helped compile. Videos, testimonies, transcripts, proof, not sentiment. Raina didn't need to dress her truth. She only needed to deliver it. They passed veterans in suits, some nodding, some staring silently. One man murmured, "You're her." She acknowledged him, but didn't slow her stride. The Senate Subcommittee on Veterans Affairs had called her to testify, not out of goodwill, but because they had no choice. Her story had pushed the national conversation into territory they could no longer ignore. Inside, cameras were already positioned. The nameplate read, "Sergeant Raina Jefferson, retired." She read it once, then sat. 7 panel members, 4 men, 3 women. A mix of parties, a mix of motives. Some leaned in with genuine interest. Others folded their arms, guarded. "Sergeant Jefferson," the chair began, "thank you for being here. You've received considerable attention in recent weeks." Raina nodded. "I didn't ask for it. I just stopped hiding." The chair allowed a faint smile. We'd like to hear what happened, in your own words. She inhaled once, then began. I served 3 tours in Iraq as a combat trauma specialist. I pulled men from burning vehicles. I patched wounds while bullets tore the air. I made peace with dying, many times, but nothing prepared me for coming home. Her eyes scanned the faces before her. When I did, I was invisible. I was a waitress. A body marked with scars people pretended not to see, until they mocked them, until they mocked me. A few people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. They filmed me, laughed, called me names. I stayed silent, because that's what we're taught. Endure. But 6 months ago, I started recording. Every Tuesday. Every insult, every confession. Not for revenge, but because I realized my silence wasn't protecting anyone except them. She slid a transcript across the table. This is a verbatim record of senior executives explaining how to dismiss veterans and people of color without legal consequence. Coded language, performance traps, cultural excuses. One senator, a silver-haired woman with sharp glasses, leaned forward. And when you exposed them, they tried to break me. Online harassment, legal threats, surveillance, even physical intimidation. And your response? I kept serving, and I kept recording. Caleb sat silently behind her. Lena was nearby, pen moving across her notebook. A skeptical senator tapped his pen. Do you believe this is systemic, or just your case? If it were just me, she replied evenly, you wouldn't be holding this hearing. A murmur rippled through the chamber. I'm not the story, Raina continued. I'm the symptom. If you want to fix the system, start by believing us. Start by seeing us, not just in uniform, but especially when we're not. The silence that followed was heavy. Do you think corporate reform is enough? Someone asked. Only if it's enforced. Only if you give people like me legal ground to stand on, not just applause. The chair nodded. Thank you, Sergeant Jefferson. We'll enter your documents into the record. Raina rose. Caleb followed. A staffer pressed a small pin into her hand, the Senate Veteran Advocate Medal. It was unofficial, symbolic, but real. She held it for a long moment before slipping it into her pocket. Outside, a crowd had gathered. Reporters, advocates, strangers. Some clapped, others saluted. Raina didn't wave, she simply nodded. You made history, Lena said on the steps. I told the truth, Raina replied. Same thing. As they descended, Caleb's phone buzzed. Langdon posted again, he said. Let him. I have nothing left to say to him. This time, Caleb added, he's not talking to you. He's warning other executives, telling them what happened to him could happen to them. Raina stopped. Fear can be useful. Caleb nodded. Especially if it keeps them from repeating it. At the car, she glanced back at the Capitol, not with awe, but as if taking measure of it before getting in. Later that afternoon, Raina Jefferson walked back into Ray's diner, not as the waitress she once was, but as someone who had just spoken before the United States Senate. The bell over the door chimed exactly as it always had, and the familiar aroma of coffee hung in the air. Miguel glanced up from the register and gave her a simple nod. No speeches, no grand welcome, just recognition, and that was enough. The regulars rose to their feet and applauded. It wasn't for show, but for her. Raina gave a modest wave before slipping behind the counter. She no longer wore her uniform. Today it was tailored slacks and a button-down shirt, sleeves rolled high so the scars on her arms were visible. No one looked away. Caleb entered a few minutes later, setting his briefcase down and loosening his tie before taking his usual spot at the bar. "You know you trended higher than the State of the Union," he said lightly. Raina smirked. "Don't tempt me with power." Too late. Across the nation, her testimony was being dissected by news outlets. Clips from her hearing played alongside commentary. On social media, her words were everywhere. One quote in particular had gone viral. "Start by believing us, especially when we're not in uniform." It became a rallying cry. Veterans began using it as a hashtag to share their stories. Some were heartbreaking, others defiant. Most had never been heard until now. That evening, Raina's phone rang. The caller ID read private number. She answered. "Miss Jefferson, this is Brigadier General Louise Merrick. I'm calling to invite you to join a national task force on veteran reintegration and workplace equity. You'll be compensated, but more importantly, you'll have a real voice. We want you at the table." Raina blinked. "Why me?" "Because we've all discussed this problem for years. You showed the country what happens when it's ignored, and what it can become when it's addressed." There was a pause. "I accept," she said. That night, Miguel hosted a quiet dinner. No press, no speeches, just the diner crew, a few veterans, Lena, Caleb, and Raina. The honor wall glowed under string lights. Someone strummed a guitar. They sang old road songs. Caleb told a story that left everyone laughing through their tears. Then Raina stood, glass of lemonade in hand. "I never set out to be anyone's example, only to avoid disappearing. But you all made it possible for me to stay visible. Maybe now we can make it easier for the next person." She lifted her glass. "To staying seen." The room echoed her words. To staying seen. 3 days later, Langdon and Crane formally dissolved. In their final press release, they admitted to failures, accepted responsibility, and pledged support for the incoming veteran initiative, one Raina would help lead. Some called it damage control. Others said it was justice. Raina simply called it overdue. The following week, she flew to Chicago to meet nonprofit leaders and federal coordinators. The schedule was packed. Legislative drafts, policy frameworks, outreach strategies. But when she spoke, the room listened. She didn't sound like a politician. She spoke like someone who had carried pain in silence. Afterward, a young congressional aide approached her. "I've worked on veteran legislation for 2 years, but today, you made me truly see it." Raina thanked her and said, "Then fight harder." Back at the diner, Caleb and Miguel kept things running. Later that afternoon, Raina Jefferson walked back into Ray's diner, this time not as a waitress, but as a woman who had just addressed the United States Senate. The bell above the door gave the same familiar chime, and the scent of fresh coffee still hung in the air. Miguel glanced up from behind the register and gave her a small nod. No speeches, no fuss, just quiet recognition. That was enough. The regulars rose to their feet, offering a warm round of applause. Not as a performance, but as a genuine gesture. Raina gave a modest wave and slipped behind the counter. She wasn't in uniform anymore. Instead, she wore tailored slacks and a button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, her scars uncovered. No one looked away. A few minutes later, Caleb walked in, dropped his briefcase onto the counter, and loosened his tie before sliding onto his usual stool. "You know," he said casually, "you out-trended the State of the Union last night." Raina smirked. "Don't tempt me with power." "Too late," he replied. Across the country, news stations were replaying clips from her testimony, breaking them down frame by frame. On social media, one line had caught fire. Start by believing us, especially when we're not in uniform. It became a rallying cry. Veterans began sharing their own stories under the hashtag, some heartbreaking, some defiant, most of them unheard until now. That evening, Raina's phone lit up with a call from an unlisted number. She hesitated, then answered. Ms. Jefferson, this is Brigadier General Louise Merrick. I'm calling to formally invite you to join a national task force on veteran reintegration and workplace equity. You'll be compensated, but more importantly, you'll have real influence. We want your voice at the table. Raina blinked in surprise. Why me? Because we've been discussing this problem for years, Merrick said. But you showed the country what it looks like when it's ignored, and what it can become when it's addressed. After a moment of silence, Raina said, I accept. That night, Miguel hosted a small dinner at the diner. No reporters, no speeches, just the staff, a few local veterans, Lena, Caleb, and Raina. The honor wall glowed softly under string lights. Someone pulled out a guitar, and before long they were singing old road songs. Caleb told a story so funny, it left everyone laughing through tears. When the noise settled, Raina stood, with a glass of lemonade in hand. I never set out to be anyone's example, she said. I just didn't want to disappear. You all made it possible for me to stay visible, and maybe now we can make it easier for the next person. She raised her glass. To staying seen. Everyone joined in. To staying seen. 3 days later, Langdon and Crane officially dissolved. Their final press release acknowledged failures, accepted responsibility, and pledged support for a new veteran initiative, one Raina would help lead. Some called it damage control. Others said it was long overdue. Raina simply thought of it as necessary. The following week, she flew to Chicago to meet with nonprofit leaders and federal coordinators. The schedule was packed. Drafting legislation, reviewing policy proposals, planning outreach. But when she spoke, the room paid attention. She didn't sound like a politician. She spoke like someone who had survived the silence. After one session, a young congressional aide approached her. I've been working on veteran bills for 2 years, the aide said, but today you made me see them. Raina thanked her, then smiled. Good. Now fight harder. Meanwhile, back at the diner, Miguel and Caleb kept things running, waiting for the day she'd walk back through that door again, this time carrying even more change with her. Sergeant Raina Jefferson was honored, not for her valor in combat, but for the way she had reshaped the fight at home. Applause filled the room. She stepped forward, neither bowing her head nor smiling for the cameras. The medal, to her, wasn't a trophy. It was a sign of something larger. When the flashes went off, she didn't flinch, because this time she owned the narrative. Back in her small town, the diner settled back into its usual rhythm. Caleb placed the medal in the front window, not as a boast, but as a reminder that greatness doesn't always wear rank. Sometimes it wears an apron. Raina poured coffee, wiped counters, and listened. One afternoon, she spotted James helping a young man fill out a job application. He just got out, James explained quietly. Wants to work, but doesn't know how to say it without sounding broken. He's not broken, Raina said with a faint smile. He just speaks a different truth. The program Lena had envisioned began to take shape. They called it Scars and Stories, a curriculum built from real veterans' voices, designed to teach empathy, resilience, and awareness. In its very first pilot at a local high school, a student, asked, "Is it okay if I don't want to join the military, but still want to help those who did?" Raina's reply was simple. It's never about the uniform. It's about showing up when it matters. When spring returned, Ray's Diner had become more than a place to eat. A former Navy cook ran the kitchen. A Marine led weekend writing workshops in the back room. A retired Army nurse offered free mental health checkups every Wednesday. The honor wall spread from 1 to 3 walls, yet Raina never stopped being present. One evening, she watched a group of teenagers taking photos of the sidewalk plaque outside. "You're her," one of them whispered. Raina nodded. "And so are you, if you choose to be." 6 months later, the documentary's final episode was released as a short film. In its closing scene, Raina sat with James on the bench behind the diner. "Do you think people really change?" James asked. "I think they remember who they were before the world told them to forget," she said. "And if they can't remember?" She glanced at the sky. "Then we remind them." Years later, long after the cameras stopped rolling, visitors still came, some with letters, some with silence. All left transformed. On the corner of Veterans Row, where Raina had once been invisible, a mural now stretched across the brick. A woman in uniform, scars visible, eyes forward, coffee pot in one hand, medal in the other. Beneath it, 3 words: strength in stillness. The war had ended, but the mission endured. In the quiet after the credits rolled on The Weight We Carry, something stayed with the audience. It wasn't just the fading music or the applause. It was the recognition that strength isn't always loud, that battles often continue long after the gunfire stops, and that they're fought not in deserts or jungles, but in diners, courtrooms, sidewalks, and in the silent spaces of our conscience. Raina Jefferson had never sought the label of hero. She didn't chase headlines or medals. Her scars weren't pleas for pity. They were proof of survival, of service, of sacrifice. When the world mocked her, tried to turn her into a stereotype, she didn't answer with rage. She answered like a soldier, with precision. She remembered faces, names, and words. And when the moment came, she acted, not to destroy, but to expose, to restore, to remind. At our channel, we believe the greatest stories aren't always the noisiest. They're the ones hiding in plain sight. Stories of dignity reclaimed, of silence broken with grace, of scars worn as medals, not for what was endured, but for what was overcome. Raina's story didn't truly end with a court case or a viral clip. It began there. Because it was never just about one waitress. It was about all of us. The assumptions we hold, the voices we overlook, the people we decide aren't worthy of respect. It was about the moment one person refuses invisibility and changes everything. What if we chose to listen more closely? What if every scar we saw became a testament instead of a mark of shame? What if we realized that behind every quiet worker we pass by, there could be a universe of resilience waiting to be acknowledged? What if we measured greatness not by titles, but by how someone treats others when no one is looking? Though her chapter in our series has closed, its echoes continue. In veterans who now speak openly about their struggles, in the teenage girl who no longer hides her own scars, in executives rewriting their hiring policies, in classrooms where scars and stories is taught, and in every diner where someone chooses to truly see the person in front of them. In the final frame, missed by many, Ray's Diner is closed for the night. The chairs are stacked, lights dimmed, and behind the counter, Raina quietly dries a single coffee cup. She's not posing, not preaching, just being. A silent message. The story isn't over. The work continues. To everyone who has followed this journey, thank you. You've seen justice in motion. You've seen how one woman used truth as her compass, empathy as her weapon, and quiet resilience as her legacy. But this is not just a story to admire. It's one to carry with you into your workplaces, your schools, your dinner tables, and your daily decisions. Because Raina's strength isn't hers alone. It belongs to all of us if we're willing to claim it. We tell stories that reclaim dignity, that challenge assumptions, that reveal what real courage looks like in everyday clothes. If her journey has touched you, share where you're watching from in the comments. Share your thoughts. Share your own story. And if you believe in the power of one voice, one action, one scar, transformed into strength, then like, subscribe, and join us. The next story might be yours, and it deserves to be told.